Chapter 9, Revolutions of Industrialization. So let's go ahead and start off with what actually started. What was one of the things that went hand in hand, really had an impact, and actually kind of helped fuel the Industrial Revolution, and that was the Agricultural Revolution.
From 1700 until the beginning of the First World War in 1914, a period of great social, political, and economic upheaval unfolded across the globe. Every aspect of daily life was transformed in some way. The Industrial Revolution began in Britain during the early part of the 18th century. Prior to this, life in Britain had remained largely unchanged for generations. People lived in agrarian societies. Farming was ruled by the seasons, and the harvest was at the mercy of the sun, rain, and wind. There are many contributing factors that made the Industrial Revolution possible. Too many to cover here. In this program, we will focus on the Agricultural Revolution, the rise of the factory, new technology, and the role of Britain's empire. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't be happy with the nickname turnip. Well, believe it or not, one Englishman, Lord Charles Townshend, was given the nickname Turnip Townsend, and we're about to find out why. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, most people in Britain lived in open-field villages. They relied on subsistence farming, which produced enough food for the peasants or tenants of the landowner, but little, if any, extra. Farmers used a system of rotating crops over 3 fields to grow food. Each year, 2 of the fields were used to grow crops, barley and wheat for example, while the 3rd field would lie fallow, left unplanted, to allow the soil to replenish lost nutrients. Livestock would graze in the fallow field, helping to fertilize the soil. In the following year, the crops would be rotated through the fields, 1 fallow, 2 productive. Peasant and village households were given a number of strips in the fields to plant their crops. From the 16th century onwards, landowners started turning open fields into enclosed paddocks that were assigned to a single farm. They wanted to bring their land under tighter control and make it more productive. This also meant the peasants were no longer able to strip farm and sometimes could not access water. Now unemployed, most of the peasants had 2 options: work as a hired labourer on a farm or seek employment in town. Some of the larger landowners subdivided the land and then leased it back to the peasants. The way in which crops were sown was improved when, in 1700, Jethro Tull invented a horse-drawn seed drill that could plant 3 rows of seed at a time. It was able to drill a hole, drop the seeds in, and cover them over with soil in one action. Prior to this, seeds would be thrown by hand into the ploughed furrows. Some seed would be eaten by birds, and some blew away with the wind. Jethro Tull's seed drill dramatically improved production by increasing crop yields 5-fold. In 1730, the Rotherham triangular plough, patented by Joseph Folliambi, had an iron blade rather than wood, and its design made it lighter and easier to use than earlier ploughs. It required only 2 horses rather than 4, and 1 ploughman. The Rotherham plough had the dual benefit of cutting labour costs and saving time. And now we come to Turnip Townsend. During the 1730s, Lord Turnip Townsend introduced the Dutch 4-crop rotation system to Britain. The 4-crop rotation system rotated wheat, turnips, barley, and cloves, for example, through 4 fields. The turnips and cloves helped nourish the soil with nutrients which, in turn, would produce a better wheat and barley crop the following year. In winter months, turnips were fed to livestock. This meant that it was no longer necessary for farmers to slaughter their beasts before winter. Improvements in farming had a dramatic social and economic impact in Britain. It now took fewer people to produce more food. By the end of the 18th century, farming had been transformed from primarily satisfying basic food and clothing needs of the village community into a commercial opportunity to sell the increasing food surplus to emerging local and foreign markets.
Okay, so that is basically our start to the Industrial Revolution. So we have to think about our original revolution. So we think about the French Revolution, the Haitian Revolution, the American Revolution, our Latin American revolutions, our Hispanic revolutions. With all of those came a couple things: the abolition of slavery, a few more rights for women, people at least pushing for that. The abolition of slavery is going to be a big deal. So, with so many agrarian societies, those agriculture societies, the farming societies, how are they supposed to get all this done without that free labor? Well, what that's going to do is that's going to push for people to have more inventions. So people are like, well, hey, if I can't have all this free labor, I'm going to have to figure out a way to make this happen. And so you're going to have like Jethro Tull with the seed drill. So you're going to have all of these people coming up with these ideas. And it's like, hey, well, one, you don't need as many people on the farm. Also, you're going to start having places like the enclosure system in Britain where they big farms come in and buy up the little farms. And so these people don't have anything to do. So that's going to be kind of a big deal. So here is a video over the second agricultural revolution. Keep in mind that the first agricultural revolution
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Mr. Sin channel.
The first agricultural revolution is the Neolithic Revolution.
You've watched my first video that talked about the first agricultural revolution. That'll be important to understand as we move now into the second agricultural revolution. Now, our second agricultural revolution really takes off during the Industrial Revolution. This is when we have a lot of new ideas, new inventions that make new farming techniques possible. Inventions like Elon Whitney's the cotton gin or the seed drill made efficiency now possible with agriculture. We start to see farmers innovating, trying new things, and starting to experiment and push the boundaries of what was, at least before, never possible. And we're starting to get more and more food production. This will eventually lead to more population growth, and we'll see a bunch of other changes to society. But it's important to remember that the second agricultural revolution really starts with our Industrial Revolution. One of the things that happened during the second agricultural revolution is the enclosure movement. Originally, land in Europe was actually kind of communal, and so farmers could just graze and partake on the land as they needed. What happened during the enclosure movement is this land got split up and it became privatized. A lot of the small farmers kind of got pushed off and they had to move to the cities. And when privatization of the land happened, we saw that yields and output increased. This actually illustrates the concept of the tragedy of the commons, which we'll cover later in this class. If you want to watch the video on that now, you can click the card on the top right. But what's happening here is with the enclosure movement, now land's privatized. We started to see farmers take better care of it, and we started to find that when they had private land and owned their own means of production, they had incentives to produce more and more food. This increase in output increased our population growth. Another thing that started to happen during our second agricultural revolution is crop rotation. Farmers had to take better care of their land, and they realized if they kept planting the same crop over and over again, it would deplete all the resources in the land. So they would rotate crops so that way different nutrients would be taken out of the land each year, thus protecting their investment on their land. And that also increased yield again. And so we saw this boom in food production, a boom in population growth, and a bunch of new ideas. And all of this led to the eventual growth of society. So as a time in history, this is a very productive time. Another thing that happened during this time is we actually saw the first steps of globalization occur. We have new technology. We have trains and boats that are more efficient, can carry things farther and faster. And with all of this means we have new markets. When farmers had new connected markets, they had more places to sell their products. And it wasn't just farmers, it was also the industries located in urban areas. So this agricultural revolution, the second one, mixed with the industrial revolution, led to productivity and increased output for everything. And with all this new population growth and new markets to sell to, we saw GDP go up and a growth in the economy. And with all of these new products and new markets, well, we started to see again another boom as more and more people were able now to have connections to other parts of the world. So the second agricultural revolution kind of helped create this big urban movement. And the reason why it did is by supporting all of these new people who were living in the cities with food from the farms, it let them take other jobs on. And then we saw more productivity in urban centers along with an increased output from the rural communities. So the agricultural revolution helped both parts of society and overall grew the entire country. This was a really quick look at the second agricultural revolution, but hopefully you kind of see how it connects to the industrial revolution, what the enclosure movement is, and how some of these new markets kind of spurred more growth. And even how did this whole revolution.
Okay, so that kind of lets us show us how the agricultural revolution and how the other revolutions kind of started. So now what do we see? We see that there is going to be a growing energy crisis because there is need to fuel things. We start off with water being our main fuel source. Okay, so we've got the water giving us a fuel source. So everything, all the factories are originally put together close to water. As we run out of room, we start to come up with the steam engine that requires coal. That's going to be something that is going to be, coal mines are going to be big. So we're going to find other sources for energy besides water. Coal, oil, and natural gas are all, these three are going to be huge in solving this growing energy crisis. So, what good impacts and what bad impacts did the Industrial Revolution have? So, you really do want to think about the impacts of the Industrial Revolution. Some good impacts would be something along the lines of longevity. People are living longer in some instances because of food. In some instances, they're not because of pollution and dangerous working conditions. So you're going to see some groups of people benefit from the Industrial Revolution, whereas others are definitely going to be harmed from it. Another harm that is going to come, which we'll see a picture later, is the pollution of the waterways. So let's look at this image here. We see an image of men stoking the fire to create the gas in order to light the power for lights, outside lights, street lights. You can kind of see that one right there. And so you can see that the artist has got this, showing this is not very positive. There's a lot going on in this image. It's clearly hard work. We see men doing this hard work. It is not a pretty picture. And so I would say that the author of this, the point of view, is definitely not a positive one when it comes to the Industrial Revolution. This is an image of producing gas from coal. This coal was central to the Industrial Revolution. An early industrial process in Britain involved the burning of coal to produce this coal gas, and that was for public lighting, that image that I showed you. This image from 1822 shows that the process in action is one at this one such production facility in London. Those who stoked the furnaces often developed various lung disease and died early. Again, some people benefited with a longer life and others did not. How does this image illustrate the social and economic changes that took place during the Industrial Revolution? Well, one thing I could say as far as social goes is you're definitely going to have another class pop up, not the working class, but the people that are the owners, the ones that are managing. They're going to be a middle class that's going to arise. Economically, you have more job opportunities, but as far as that goes, that's going to be our biggest, probably our two biggest ones when it comes to the Industrial Revolution. And next, our first industrial societies. So when I look at this, this is an image, probably one where it is more of a positive fact, a positive look of the Industrial Revolution. As far as the cleanliness, it doesn't look too horrible. Of course, there is a man who looks like he's maybe getting onto a woman. We're not sure. But the other women seem to be working happily. These two are talking. So this is a positive look at the Industrial Revolution. But again, women are working the lighter clothing jobs in the textile factories. Not that they were lighter, because they were not. We will look at that when we see the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. But this is just demonstrating to us another aspect of the Industrial Revolution with women. When I look at this, I see the major industrial areas in green, the railways in yellow, the little blue iron ore fields, and then the red coal fields. So when I look at this, what is the relationship between the areas of natural resources and the growth of industry? Well, I see the natural resources are here. Industry, if you look at Great Britain, it kind of all overlaps. Okay. Spain, France, not necessarily. We have a lot of deposits, but we don't have a lot of factories growing. But I do notice that there's a lot of railways here, and our industrial areas generally are around areas of natural resources and definitely railways. And so that's where we're going to see those things pop up. I definitely suggest, I will not put it on here, to go watch The Industrial Revolution by Heimler. The Industrial Revolution begins 1750 to 1900. Good video. Definitely encourage you to go watch this. And then we're going to come into impacting the world, working conditions. The Industrial Revolution is going to impact the globe. It just is. And it is not just going to impact the environment with the destruction of forests and the pollution, but we're also going to have other changes that are going to happen, and people are going to have reactions. And so one of the things that we see is we see this image here. And if I look at this image, I see a crown, makes me think royalty. I see it is a skeleton pumping water, and it is pumping water to, at the bottom, it says open to the poor. So we know that these are some poor people. And it says Death's Dispensary. So I'm going to say that this water is probably not clean that they are pumping out to the unknown. The kids look pretty cheery. She looks withered, tired. So these are probably some of our factory workers, people that are working hard, trying to make ends meet, drinking water that has been probably heavily polluted. Not really a win-win for them. But some people didn't want to deal with the machines at all.
And now a page from our Sunday morning almanac, March 11th, 1811, 207 years ago today. The day a workers' movement famously said no to technology. That was the first day of the Luddite protests in England. Named for a mythical figure named Ned Ludd, the Luddites were textile workers who feared automated loom machinery would put them out of work and destroy their way of life. They fought back by breaking into textile mills and breaking up the hated machines, a violent campaign portrayed in a 1988 British docudrama.
And I'm telling you this much, I, for one, am not going to be a slave to a bloody machine for the rest of my life.
And though the original Luddites are long gone, the word Luddite survives. It's become a catch-all term for everyone from modern-day factory workers concerned about automation to low-tech traditionalists who reject the prevailing notion that absolutely everyone has to carry a smartphone. Ned Ludd may have been a legend, but more than 2 centuries later, the Luddites he inspired, like them or not, still carry on.
Okay, so we see that people had a reaction. And interesting, if you look at change in continuity over time with the Luddites, we see that there's still people that, again, are kind of adverse to technology. Some people don't like cell phones at all. Some people don't like technology. You still have people that want to live off the grid. So you kind of see this all over. Socialism versus capitalism. Not only are we going to have people's reactions, but we are going to have a political and economic reaction. Adam Smith and Karl Marx are 2 people that they are must knows. If you don't feel like you know them well enough after I'm finished talking, then you definitely need to make sure that you take some time and look into both of them. Socialism is considered a political and economic theory of social organization, which advocates the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned or regulated by the community as a whole, where capitalism is an economic and political system in which the country's trade and industry are controlled by private owners for profit rather than by a state, an era of free market capitalism. And I was kind of disappointed that your vocab this week did not have, or this chapter did not have laissez faire on it. I really feel like it should have. So Adam Smith. He wrote The Wealth of Nations. He is all about free market capitalism, all about a laissez-faire approach. Laissez-faire meaning government does not they do not get involved. The government does not regulate. They do not tell people what to do, how much to sell, what to sell. So it's really on the people themselves. Adam Smith believed that that the economy would regulate itself, that it would make sure that everybody kind of kept checks and balances. So, like, if I personally wanted to open a business selling chocolate chip cookies, I could sell them for, like $8 a cookie. But let's say Jane comes in and she decides, I'm going to sell chocolate chip cookies too, because we can with our free market economy. She's going to come in and sell them, and she's going to kind of undercut me and sell them for $5 because she wants to sell all her cookies. So people are going to buy them because they're cheaper. And some people aren't even going to care about the quality. They're just going to buy them because they're cheaper. That is what you can do. And according to Adam Smith, that's keeping the price in check. I'm not going to continue to sell my cookies at $8 if somebody's selling theirs at $5. I'm going to have to bring my price down to compete. This is where the market keeps itself in check, so people aren't overdoing it. Now, unless these two people team up and say, we're both going to sell chocolate chip cookies and we're both going to sell them for $8, which is possible. Here's the whole thing. With socialism and capitalism, they both look great on paper, but both can be very severely flawed. Here's how I like to explain socialism and capitalism. And it's a little rudimentary and maybe not exact science, but I think it kind of helps a little bit in explaining the difference. So socialism is like coming into a classroom and everybody getting a B. I just tell everybody you have a B. You have to do your work, but everybody gets a B. So it doesn't matter how good your job is or not, you get a B. And then capitalism is you get what you earn. If you work hard, you're going to get that A. If you don't, you're not. And that's okay. Like I said, it's very rudimentary and I understand that, but it is kind of a basis of the difference between socialism and capitalism. So the problems with socialism is that there are going to be some people that are not going to work because they're going to get paid no matter what. With capitalism, you're going to have people that are going to have super greed and they're not going to share that like they're supposed to with everyone else. Now, so Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations. Karl Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto. So let's look at this image here. We have an image of capitalism with the owners and the king or royalty or leader at the top, under the money, of course. Money is king. Then we have the religion, and then we have the military, and then we have like the middle class, upper middle class, those that are just loving life. And then we have underneath that all the working class holding up the entire system. So it lets me know that capitalism is nothing without your working class. That working class is essential. And I think we saw that during the pandemic. Those people that still went to work, they still went to the grocery stores. They still went and worked in fast food restaurants that were still open and only open through the drive-thru. This is a big deal. So if I look at this, I could say, how does the artist view a capitalist society? I'm going to say with the dead child on the bottom, probably not really well. You see them, they're all struggling to hold this up because they struggle in real life. Like this is a struggle. So this is a pyramid of the capitalist society. Again, the author is not looking at this in a positive light. Whoa. Socialism is throttling the country. Who is likely to support this propaganda? Most likely somebody who believes in a capitalist society. They're going to be somebody higher up that doesn't believe in socialism. They don't want equality down there at the bottom. So they're definitely not going to they're going to support this. They're going to be somebody who's like, no, we don't want socialism. And other people who are hoping to get a little bit more equality, maybe some people down here on the bottom want more of a say, are going to be for socialism. The bourgeoisie versus the proletariat. So the proletariat is your working class. These are the people that are basically creating that means of production, and they are doing that as a means to survive. They're generally exploited by the bourgeoisie. Generally, they earn very little work, very little money, and live in poverty-like conditions. The bourgeoisie refers to a capitalist who owns the means of production. They're usually the most wealthy in society. They're going to exploit the proletariat and make a lot of profits. So the working class versus the owners. According to Karl Marx, we do not believe that this will work. He says that the proletariat will get so sick of the bourgeoisie, they will rise up and overthrow them. Karl Marx was very pro-classless society, did not believe that we should have a class in society. There shouldn't be a rich and a poor. There shouldn't be people that own a lot of money, that have a ton of money, and people that don't. Because of that, he said there would be tensions. Adam Smith says, and it'll all keep itself in check. Two very, very different ideas. So what are some impacts? And I'm going to cover part of this, and then I'm going to go ahead and stop because this is where we were in class. So what are some impacts? In America, we see where some of the biggest changes are going to occur. And you'll notice we also see that's where some of most of the immigration is. In Europe, whenever America, Russia, Japan, and Europe, they're all probably the biggest players when it comes to the beginning of industrialization. But once America starts to industrialize, we've got more area, we've got more land, we've got lots of resources. Europe's boom starts to kind of trickle down. And remember, Samuel Slater is the one who came into Europe, goes back to the United States with everything in his head, and recreates a factory system, even though Great Britain tried to stop it. So we have this, and all of these people coming here, which is great, creating a very big melting pot is what the United States is known as, because all these people are different. French, German, British, Italian, they're all coming over here. So all of these different ethnic groups living together, creating a melting pot of sorts. And so that's going to play a big role also later in history. So we see all of that. America is going to receive a lot of foreign investments, especially South America. And because of these foreign investments, they're going to continue to grow. Russia, however, is going to have a lot of violent upheavals. And the reason this is so different in America versus everywhere else is because we have a capitalist society. It's like, go for it. Create what you got to create. Let's do this. Russia, on the other hand, does not. People cannot just go make money. They cannot just take advantage of all this situation going on. They're kind of stuck. So how did revolutions impact the effects of industrializations? That's how. Different governments that were set up. Our government, go for it, guys. Make what you want. Make as much as you want. Russia's tried to control it. So they did not grow like everyone else did. Same with Japan. So what economies and governments are going to be created after their respective revolutions? So that's what you have to look at and see why that was so impactful. We're going to go ahead and stop here, and I will join you again for our next session.